Hello, Bible readers. It took us 3 posts to make our way through chapters 39 to 41, where Pharaoh finally enthrones Joseph in the end. And I mentioned that that's a part of the narrative that completely neglects to address Joseph's roots, his family. Nothing is said of his brothers or of Jacob. It's concerned only with Joseph's ascent to power within the empire. Chapters 42 to 44 circle back to Joseph's family of origin. Remember in chapter 37, verses 6 to 9, Joseph dreams 2 dreams. The first is about the bowing down of the sheaves. The second is about the bowing down of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Brueggemann says, maybe one of those dreams pertains to Joseph's rise and his rule over Egypt, while the other is about his rule over his brothers and father. Of course, one is only possible because of the other. Ruling over his brothers can only happen because of his rule in Egypt. But that's going to be a helpful way, maybe as helpful a way as any, to package these 6 chapters in our minds. To remember the 2 dreams and consider these 2 realms of rule. His public rule within the empire and then his private rule within his family. Brueggemann devotes a lot of ink just in a description of the players in the drama. I'll call them characters. And it's interesting to reevaluate who we're talking about to this point because there's been some progression in character development, you could say. Joseph knows what's going on at this point in the story. Joseph has all the power. Jacob, his father, knows nothing and is simply grieving his loss. And the brothers are just guilt-ridden. Notice how differently Joseph comes across in these chapters for today as compared with the chapters that have led up to now. In chapter 37, Joseph is just a naive boy, oblivious to how obnoxious he is with the robe and everything else. And in chapter 39 to 41, well, then we see him as a noble man, a man of integrity, able to resist Potiphar's wife, gets himself thrown into prison. He's not intimidated there, just takes injustice as it comes and then also reward as it comes. So there was movement there. And then in these chapters that we're reading for today, Joseph is ruthless. He's calculating. Maybe there were multiple Joseph traditions within the stories that make up this complete narrative. That's one guess that, maybe this group of people wrote about Joseph in this way. He's very calculating and, a schemer almost. And then maybe there was another group of people who talked about Joseph and wrote about him in this way, that he was integrity. And maybe there's others that talked about Joseph as just being a naive boy. But maybe Joseph just changes over time. Anyway, Brueggemann says the agenda of this narrative concerns members of this family coming to terms with each other, coming to terms with the past, coming to terms with the dreams. Food is the obvious need here that drives these chapters, but the food is more of a stand-in for how this family is struggling for survival. It's not just about survival by being able to eat. That is really just kind of almost like a metaphor for how this family is striving to survive. Because in this family, the struggle for survival is also a struggle for faith. They are intertwined. A struggle to trust in the promise. A struggle to believe in the power of the dreams. That's the only way this family can survive, is to grow in faith, to believe in these dreams. That struggle to believe starts with the brothers. Their feelings of guilt have enormous power over them. Brueggemann writes, and I love this, the brothers are not free enough to have faith. Faith requires a certain level of soul freedom, and their soul is burdened by guilt. I have seen this before, have you? People so guilt-ridden that they can't. It's not that they won't. They can't believe in grace or truth or anything but how guilty they are. And as a result of not having the capacity to believe, it's all taken up in guilty feelings. As a result, they can't see themselves as a generation of promise bearers. If they can't believe in the promise, they can't believe any one of them can bear the promise. In a faithless existence, one that's only dominated by guilt, they can only know death and endings. That's all they can believe in. There are no new possibilities in a guilt worldview. There can be no gifts from God, because who could possibly deserve those gifts when they're so guilty? They see their guilt as the only driving force of everything. What is this that God has done to us? They ask in chapter 42, verse 28, when they find the money back in their packs. Their limited view of God only allows for God to be a quid pro quo God, where God is only able to respond to their guilt. They can't believe in a God of promise, or a God of grace, or a God who would break their endless cycle of hopelessness. Instead, their world is so small, where no thing can be hoped for. They're trapped. That's a really important insight about the brothers. And then there's the father, Jacob. He shows a spark of faith. After he releases his beloved Benjamin, he says, "May El Shaddai grant you mercy before the man," who is Joseph. El Shaddai is an old school name for God. By the power of old Ironsides, by the, remember the Alamo. Sometimes we might invoke an old memory to remind us the promise was kept back then, or we did it back then, or whatever. It can be done again. That's kind of what's happening here. Jacob is calling on an old relationship that Jacob has had with mercy, with grace, with God. Jacob is staking everything. Benjamin is his everything on that name, an old trustworthy name. Jacob, unlike all of Joseph's brothers, is willing to dare to think of a new possibility. Even in his grief, Jacob can hope. Now he later says, and this is, let's not put Jacob too far up on the pedestal. He says, "If I am bereaved of my children, then I am bereaved." Brueggemann wonders, it's difficult to know where faith leaves off and cynical resignation sets in. I love that because it's real. Like, even in the most faithful thing anybody says in this part of Genesis, it's coupled with, but whatever. Who knows? My sons might all die too, And with that less than 110% faith, does God turn on Jacob? Of course not. God does what God wills. God is not simply provoked and then compelled to punish. Like, well, now that you said it's difficult to know, or if I am bereaved of my children, then I'm bereaved. Oh, you said that. Now I can't offer the grace and mercy that I was going to. That's not how God works. So the brothers, the father, Joseph, those are the three characters really, but hidden behind, within these characters and their interactions is the will of God. The narrator knows that the hidden God moves without the assent, without the knowledge of any of the characters. God simply moves on to keep the dream. God does what God does. Waiting must be done. And so we will wait till chapter 45 in the next post. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.